Canada has just made history. It has become the first G7 country to approve generic semaglutide, the active ingredient in Ozempic, and some pharmacies are already beginning to stock it. For people paying hundreds of dollars a month for a GLP-1 medication, this is potentially huge news. But before you start planning a trip across the border, there are some important things that you need to know about who can get it, how much it may cost, whether it works as well as Ozempic, and why Americans may still be waiting years. Sorry, guys, but yes, years for an FDA-approved generic version. Let's break this down. So here's what happened. Health Canada recently approved 2 generic versions of semaglutide. The first was approved for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, followed just days later by a second approval for Canadian pharmaceutical company Apotex. These medications contain the exact same active ingredient found in Ozempic, semaglutide. They were approved in Canada for adults with type 2 diabetes, although semaglutide is often prescribed off-label for weight management. The approvals become possible after Novo Nordisk's Canadian exclusivity protections expired earlier this year, which opened the door for generic competition. According to reports, some Canadian pharmacies have already begun receiving inventory, although supplies remain limited in certain areas due to strong demand and ongoing distribution rollouts. The big question, of course, is will it be cheaper? The biggest reason this story is getting so much attention right now, of course, is the cost. Brand name Ozempic can cost roughly $300 to $400 Canadian dollars per month, and sometimes more depending on dosage and pharmacy pricing. Experts estimate that generic competition could dramatically lower those costs. When only one generic is available, pricing is typically around 75 to 85% of the brand name price. Once multiple generic competitors enter the market, prices can fall to around 50% of the brand price. And when there are 3 or more generic versions that become available, costs could potentially drop to around 35% of the brand name cost. That means some patients could eventually see a payment of about $100 per month before pharmacy markups and, of course, dispensing fees. For many people who have been priced out of GLP-1 treatment, that is a significant difference. Now, are those generics really as good as Ozempic? This is probably the most important question. According to Health Canada and multiple pharmaceutical experts, the answer is yes. Generic semaglutide contains the same active ingredient as Ozempic and is expected to produce the same therapeutic effects. That means the same benefits and the same risks. Common side effects, of course, are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, and appetite suppression. And those are expected to remain the same. Rare but serious risks, including pancreatitis, gallbladder problems, and bowel obstruction, would also be expected to be similar. Now, one thing that is interesting is that the generic manufacturers may use different manufacturing processes than Novo Nordisk uses, but Health Canada requires manufacturers to prove that the final product meets strict standards for safety, quality, and effectiveness. In other words, the manufacturing process may differ, but the end result must perform the same way in patients. So if you're like me and you're living in the United States, you are probably wondering, when can we get generic Ozempic? Unfortunately, not anytime soon. Current estimates suggest that FDA-approved generic semaglutide likely won't arrive in the U.S. until around 2031 or 2032. The reason comes down largely to patents and regulatory protections. Drug manufacturers often hold multiple overlapping patents covering not only the medication itself, but also manufacturing methods, delivery devices, and other aspects of the product. I know this is frustrating. I get it. These layers of protection, they can significantly delay generic competition. On top of that, the FDA approval process for generic drugs is rigorous and can take years to complete. And I am going to be posting a link to that process in the description area of this video, along with a few more resources that you may want to check out. So while Canada is already beginning to see generic semaglutide enter the market, Americans may still have a long wait ahead. It is also very important to understand that compounded semaglutide is not the same thing as an FDA-approved generic. Compounded medications are prepared by compounding pharmacies, and they do not go through the same FDA approval process required for generic drugs. That doesn't automatically mean they're unsafe, but it does mean they are different products operating under a different regulatory framework. So when people hear the term generic semaglutide, they should not assume that compounded semaglutide is the same thing. It is not. They are very different categories. The bigger story here might be what happens next. If generic semaglutide successfully expands access in Canada, it could provide an early glimpse into what broader GLP-1 affordability might look like in other countries once patents begin to expire. Researchers continue to find benefits associated with semaglutide beyond blood sugar control and weight loss, including reductions in cardiovascular risk and improvements in several obesity-related conditions. As costs come down, more patients may be able to access treatments that were previously out of reach financially. And that's why many experts are calling this a major milestone. So I really want to know what you guys think. If generic semaglutide became available where you live for around $100 per month, would that change your decision about using GLP-1 medications? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy staying up to date on the latest GLP-1 news, research, and policy changes, be sure to subscribe because there's a lot happening in this space right now. I think that's an understatement. As always, I just want to remind you guys that I am not a medical professional. I'm simply a GLP-1 patient who is passionate about learning about these medications and sharing what I discover along the way. Nothing in this video should be considered medical advice, and you should always talk to your healthcare provider before starting, stopping, or changing any medications. I hope you found today's video to be helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.